What up, TCK Potters? I'm your host, Sky Guasco, joined always by my man, Lucas Kaser, and you are tuned into the Candlestick Kids Fantasy Football Podcast. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel at the Candlestick Kids, leave a rate and review anywhere you're listening to your podcast, and follow us on IG at fantasyfootball_TCK Pod and on Twitter at TCK_pod. We've got a lot to cover, so let's get into it.
Alrighty, so I think I started last week, so I'm gonna let you take the reins here. We each have two players, running backs that you should avoid. We don't really set like half PPR, PPR, or standard. So maybe do you want to do PPR or half PPR?
I just assume PPR whenever I'm doing this stuff. I think it's the most prevalent played scoring format out there right now, so we might as well just play to the crowd.
Sounds good.
Plus, when I say full PPR, it's going to help my case for both of my running backs.
Yeah.
So if we went half PPR, that would hurt me a little bit. So I'm going to jump off. Is that what we're saying?
Yep.
All right, we'll get started here. My first running back to avoid, it's got to be Josh Jacobs, Las Vegas Raiders. So like last week, I'm going to just kind of give you his ADPs, tell you why those are way too high. Again, the same disclaimer. I'm going to say it every time we're on the air here. We like these players. Every player is draftable at some point. The price tag that you're paying for these guys right now doesn't make sense for what you're likely to get in return for them. Josh Jacobs is a good example of that. He's going to either the running back 10 or the running back 9, depending on which of the three ADPs we put in here. That's Fantasy Mojo. That's that high dollar league. Fantasy Calculator, which is pretty common in the Fantasy Pros. They pick ADPs from all over. So he's either the 9 or 10, depending on where you look at, in PPR formats. And again, that makes a big difference here. So my first reason just says not all volume is created equal. Last season in 2019, Josh Jacobs had 16 PPR, or he was the 16th running back, in PPR points per game. I know we missed 3 games in there. So if you look at PPR points per game, finished 16th, and that was not due to a lack of rushing volume. Not going to be the problem again this year. In 2019, he had the 3rd most rushing attempts per game in the league with 18.6, 5th most red zone rushing attempts per game with 3.2, and the 3rd most rushing yards per game at 88.5 yards per game. This guy is an absolute stud on the ground. If he had 15 games instead of 13 last year, and I say 15, not 16, sort of to your point, the average games finished for all the top 24 running backs last year was 15.04 or whatever it was. So we gave him 15 games instead of 13. He would have finished as a running back 14 in 2009, despite being top 3 or 5 in all those volume metrics. The problem is that he was the running back 46 in targets in 2019, and he was the running back 47 in catches in 2019. The fact is, doing it on the ground just doesn't get it done for you in a PPR format in fantasy football anymore. That's just not the landscape of the league. And I want to get people listening here, he was the 46 in targets when the Raiders' number 1 wide receiver, Hunter fucking Renfrow, only had 13.6% of the team's target share. There were no receivers on this team to catch the ball. The running back group between Washington, Jalen Richard, and Jacobs here accounted for 21% of the volume share just because there were no receivers, and 30.8% of the volume share went to the group of tight ends there. So add to the team this year Henry Ruggs, Bryan Edwards, even Nelson Aguilar. Add to the team this year Jason Witten to beef up that tight end core. Add to the team Lynn Bowden, who if you don't think he's going to catch some passes this year, then you haven't been paying attention to football in a while. Lots of targets. There's a reason they went and drafted 2 wide receivers really high. There's a reason they were the first team to take a wide receiver, because 13.6 target share for your leading receiver is not good enough. It's not what they want to do. So as the ball gets spread out to more receivers, more tight ends, and another new running back coming in, I know they lost Washington, but Lynn Bowden's going to make up that target share. Expect less targets to go to Josh Jacobs. The bottom line is, the team doesn't want him catching the ball. They don't want their quarterback throwing the ball to him. So I want to be really clear about this real fast. Okay. So after I did my projections, I want to say that I believe Josh Jacobs will absolutely challenge for the rushing title this year. I think he's going to be in the top 3 in rushing yards this year. I've got him for 8 rushing touchdowns, which is a nice number. I mean, it's not 18. It's not 15 like Derrick Henry or 16 like Henry last season, but I have him producing on the ground. It's just not good enough. over the last 5 years, only 2 times did a running back with less than 25 catches finish in the top 12 for fantasy purposes in PPR scoring. That happened only twice in the last 5 years. That was Derrick Henry last year. He had 18 receptions, and it was LeGarrette Blount in 2016 when he only had 7 receptions. The reason they finished so high is that Henry had 16 rushing touchdowns. LeGarrette Blount had 18 rushing touchdowns. That's 15th and 31st best of all time in the history of recorded statistics in football. So if you are watching this and you're thinking to yourself, I believe Josh Jacobs is going to have 15-plus rushing touchdowns this year, then fine. Draft him at the 9 or 10 because that's the only way he's finishing inside the top 12. He doesn't have the receiving volume to make it happen otherwise. My stat line for him, I'll just give you the whole thing. I have him at 1,325 rushing yards, 8 touchdowns, the 1 fumble, but I only gave him 22 receptions, 169 receiving yards, and nothing in the end zone through the air. So that's just not enough for that kind of finish. I think I have him around my 18 in my PPR projections, but I'm not taking him at 10 or 9.
Yeah, I think the whole what you made the case that if you think he's going to score 15, go ahead and take him. I think if you're relying on that touchdown swing to evaluate a player, more often than not, taking the other player or just fading him is probably going to win you your fantasy league, or not win your league, but it's going to have a better output than relying on that. And well, another guy, probably a couple other guys here actually that are kind of falling into that category as well. But yeah, I think really what it comes down to is the way I started to look at this is he was so good last year, and all they did was brought in target competition, a lot of target competition. To me, that doesn't add up. It's showing that they value him as a long-term running back. They value him as their I don't even know how many rushing attempts you gave him, or I would say probably 200 rushing attempts plus a year, like for like the next 6 to 7 years. Basically, Marshawn Lynch's career is kind of what I envisioned for Josh Jacobs, just the kind of the slow and steady 5+ yards per carry, 5+ yards per carry. He's going to be out there. He's good at pass blocking. He can catch the ball, but doesn't need to, and they definitely made that obvious. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm assuming Eckler's going behind him. I would probably take a shot on Kenyon Drake. Sanders by no means is going behind him anymore. Nick Chubb, which I know he's your next guy. We can just – we're not going to go into it yet, but, I'd probably rather take him over Jacobs. I'm trying to think who's even around that ADP. That's probably about it. I think they all offer –
if you're looking at a PPR format, like I've got Devin Singletary above Josh Jacobs finishing just because of the pass catching work. I think Singletary's going to – I think he's one spot higher, but like even that kind of guy who you can get 3 rounds later than a Jacobs, like I would rather have somebody who I know is going to catch the ball in a PPR format. I'll say this, in a standard format league, Josh Jacobs is my number 11. Obviously the pass catching work doesn't hurt him nearly as much, but in a PPR, like there's other guys. Take a guy that can catch the ball. It diversifies the way that your guy can score points. Let's take that.
For sure. All right, and my first guy is Raheem Mostert. I kind of was not on him, but I was like, yeah, he's probably a good pick at the start of the offseason, and he is far from that now. Currently going as the RB23 in high-stakes leagues and on Fantasy Pros ADP RB26. So he's being drafted to be an RB2, I think round 4 to 5 turn, which if you're relying on taking a running back then, you probably should have taken one earlier is kind of the way I'm feeling the draft strategy going this year. But really what it comes down to is he is far from the starter, far from the workhorse on this team. For as good of a year as he had last year, he started 0 games, including the playoffs. He started 0 games after he ran all over the Packers. He didn't even start in the Super Bowl. He didn't even start after he ran over the Saints in that, 46 to something shootout that went to overtime. He just was not the starter, and they made that clear. And that's kind of goes along the same lines of Jacobs is people say, well, he might be the starter. Well, he would have been the starter last year for how good he was playing compared to the other running backs on the team sometime in the middle of the season or sometime at the end of the season, no matter when his sort of breakout happened. But then breaking down the whole backfield in general, because I think there's a lot of value to be had elsewhere here. If you took every single week and counted the winner in terms of the most fantasy points out of the 4 running backs, Breida, Wilson, Mostert, and Coleman in the backfield, Coleman and Mostert were tied. So you're going to take a guy that is going as the RB23 to only be leading his backfield, which you shouldn't even have that problem taking this guy to RB23 half the time. Whereas Coleman's going 20 RB slots later, 60 picks later currently as of right now. Red zone attempts. I'm going to put this one on the screen. It's a little chart. I took out Matt Breida because he's not there. Jerick McKinnon's possibly going to slide into his role. We don't know. So on the chart, it's Coleman, Mostert, and Wilson red zone attempts. If I asked 100 people, I bet you 95 of them would say that Mostert led the team in red zone attempts. I'm sure, whatever the case may be, that's probably what they would answer. He was third out of those three. He was behind Jeff Wilson in red zone attempts. So I don't even know how many snaps Jeff Wilson played. It doesn't even matter how many he played. He was behind Jeff Wilson. And inside the 20, Coleman doubled him. So inside the red zone, that's the main one I look at. I mean, inside the 5 is nice to look at, but I think inside the 20 is the one that probably sticks the most. He doubled him or almost doubled him. Inside the 10, over doubled him. Inside the 5, over doubled him again. Mostert was just so efficient last year that he was first among running backs in yards before contact per attempt, probably due to the freak tight end blocker they have, the freak fullback blocker they have, and the really good coach and offensive line they had. He was first in yards per attempt, but he was only 32nd in attempts. That goes to show that they just really didn't think he was a workhorse. So really what I'm trying to say is that now that his ADP has risen so much, and it's not even like maybe I would take him as the 23rd running back off the board, but not in the 4th round. Back when that was in the 5th, at the end of the 5th, that's probably pushing it the 6th round. That's when it's a good pick because he's a flex guy at most. That's really what he was last year, and you're taking the hit or miss. You really can't play matchup with a guy like this because he was shredding good defenses too and playing really bad against bad defenses. So it's just kind of hard to tell. But really what it comes down to is the rise in total ADP, not just the running back ADP. But I just think that it's a trap waiting to happen. And like I said, there's value elsewhere. I think Coleman going as the RB, 43, pick 103. So that's like round 8 or 9 to be the starting running back on this team is good value. I think McKinnon's going to be good value. Wilson, I guess, if you're in a deeper league, but he's not even going drafted in 12-team leagues right now for a good reason. But I think that I'm just going to fade Mostert really because his ADP is not going to go any lower, and it might honestly only go up from here.
I'm also out on Mostert this year, and the thing I like to goad Mostert truthers with is I compare him to C.J. Anderson from a couple of years ago, right? C.J. Anderson comes into the Rams team, with however many 5-6 games left to go in the season, and he's running for 6+ yards per carry, right? He's running all over everybody. Has something to do with the fact that he was fresh as shit. This is what happened with Mostert. He got his opportunities late in the season. He was fresher than all the defenses he was playing. That has something to do with the level of efficiency. Obviously, the line, the run scheme on that team is so goddamn good as well. But he's another guy like Jacobs, though. He's not going to catch the ball. Even if he does get the starting role and maintain the starting role, he's not a pass-catching back. They're not going to use him that way. I really like Jerick McKinnon to catch a lot of passes this year if he stays healthy and stays on the field. Tevin Coleman can catch a lot of passes as well. Mostert's not somebody they're going to use that for. I like that fade quite a lot. Now, if you're running a 0 RB strategy and somehow you can get Mostert as your running back 2 in rounds, like you said, 5, maybe 6, 7, yeah, take that shit all day. And I've seen in some dynasty startups where he's going really late just because the rookies are overvalued. And there's value there. Like everybody has value somewhere. You're not wrong about the total lack of value though in round 4 for a guy like Mostert, even on a good rushing team. All right, so my next dude here, we said his name already, and we've already pretty much given you the reasons why he's a bad choice. I think, am I glitching right now real bad?
No, I think you're good. Good on my end.
Looks to me like I'm glitching. I feel like I'm on acid right now. Like I can see fucking tracers behind all my movement. It's fine. We don't condone drugs here on the fantasy stuff, do we?
Nope.
What's the official stance?
I don't do them, but I'm not opposed to people doing them. Is that the right answer?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
I'm on my podcast. We're about to do our 100th episode in a couple of weeks. Totally off topic. We're kicking around ideas of what we're going to do. One idea that's on the table is we just take a bunch of something. We don't know what. Maybe blow some coke. Maybe take some X or something. Hit some mushrooms right before the show. And then just spend 2 hours just saying whatever. We think that might be really entertaining for people. It's one idea, though. We're just floating some ideas. Let's talk about my second back here to avoid it. It's Nick Chubb, Cleveland Browns. I'm going to catch some flack for this in the comments. Likely, people have been commenting about my picks on our videos recently. Not yours so much because I'm taking risks. I'm controversial. You're vanilla as fuck, I think, is what they're trying to say.
I think so.
But yeah, I'm going to get some flack for this. People fucking love Nick Chubb. They loved Nick Chubb going into last season. They fucking love Nick Chubb going into this season. His ADP right now is floating between the running back 11 in that Fantasy Mojo. Down to Fantasy Pros, he's as high as the running back 8. So people are recognizing a little. Last year I think it was 5, right? So he's falling a little bit as people see that Kareem Hunt is really going to be a threat to him on that team this year. But even at running back 11, that's too high for me. I think in PPR formats he's my 22 right now, which is maybe too low, but it is what it is. First of all, Kareem Hunt is a legitimate and real threat to his fantasy numbers for a couple of reasons. You can put this on the screen for the people if you want. We have a really nice game splits for Nick Chubb with and without Kareem Hunt because he was there for half of the season. He was gone for half of the season. So it's an 8-game to 8-game split, and that's always nice when you have an even split like that. And look, Nick Chubb's target number was cut almost in half with Kareem Hunt in the game. His receptions number was cut in half, more than cut in half with Kareem Hunt in the game. He had 7 PPR points less per game with Kareem Hunt on the field. He went from 12 rushing touchdown pace, I should say, to a 4 rushing touchdown pace with Kareem Hunt on the field. Not saying Kareem Hunt accounted for all of that, but it made a difference. 15 less rushing yards per game, which isn't a huge number, but there's a problem here. And the problem is as clear as day when you look at these numbers side by side. When Kareem Hunt's in the game, he is too good for play callers to ignore. I know Nick Chubb is a fucking stud with the ball, but newsflash, Kareem Hunt is also a fucking stud with the ball, right? Rushing leader in his rookie season. Let's not forget who Kareem Hunt is. He's a hell of a punter too, if you've seen the video.
For sure.
So not only did Kareem Hunt clearly take over the receiving work from Nick Chubb, took at least half of Nick Chubb's receiving and target work. But if you've got a set of eyes, if you've got a brain in your head, you can see that Nick Chubb doesn't belong on the field near the goal line either. That has to be Kareem Hunt's job this season. I know that when Kareem Hunt came in last year, he did not necessarily take over that role. Even late in the season, Chubb was getting the ball in close. But I have to imagine that Stefanski can read the numbers that I'm about to give to you and figure this shit out for himself. They say he's a smart coach. They say he's a good offensive mind. This is going to be the thing that tells for me. But Nick Chubb he's fucking awful near the goal line. If I have a very long track record of stating these statistics over and over because I want people to fucking hear them. So here we go. Let's run them down. Negative 0.93 yards per attempt inside the 5-yard line for Nick Chubb. The league average is 0.88. I know there's not a lot of yards to go, but he's negative almost nearly a yard. 15 carries for negative 14 yards inside the 5-yard line. League average is just under a yard. There were 9 players that carried the ball inside the 5 that were worse than him in yards per carry. There were 122 players that were better than him in yards per carry inside the 5. That's not good. He had a 13% success rate on carries inside the 5. What that means is he scored a touchdown on 13% of his carries inside the 5. The league average is 48%. There was one back in the league that had more than 3 such carries that had a worse success rate than him. That was Frank Gore, and he didn't score any with 6 touches. There were 29 players in the league that had a worse success rate inside the 5 than Nick Chubb, and 102 players in the league that had a better success rate with Nick Chubb. The only way you could have a worse success rate than Nick Chubb from inside the 5-yard line is if you didn't score any touchdowns. No backs that scored any touchdowns had a worse success rate than Nick Chubb did inside the 5-yard line. He cannot run at the goal line. Kareem Hunt, 100% success rate. It was 1 for 1. It is what it is, but he's better at it. Okay. Now, another reason that I want to bring up here is my rebuttal to the Kevin Stefanski argument. I have heard from people, hey, even if Kareem Hunt's coming in here, Kevin Stefanski runs the ball a lot more than Hitchens or Kitchens or whatever douche dick name was that coached in Cleveland last season. I have a rebuttal for that. Basically, the rebuttal is this. In the first half of the season last year when Stefanski was the OC in Minnesota averaged 32.125 rushes per game. That was a pace for 514 rushes, would have been second in the league, only behind Baltimore. But in the second half of that season, second 8 games, they averaged 25.625 rushes per game. That's a pace for 410 rushing attempts on this season, 14th in the league, right about middle. Cleveland had 393 last year. So his second half of the season pace, the second half of his first full year as an offensive coordinator, he did not run the ball a ton more than Cleveland did. He ran it a little more than Cleveland did. He ran it about the average in the league. I think he got lambasted in the fucking media after that one game where Kirk Cousins threw 8 passes or whatever it was, and he learned. This is what good coaches do. They learn and they adapt. If you look at the whole season's numbers, it looks like Kevin Stefanski loves to fucking run the ball. But that's one of those stat rat issues that you and I have talked about in the past. That doesn't tell the whole story. You have to look at what he's done lately. And in the second half, he ran it a lot less. I think I gave the Cleveland Browns 429 attempts in my projection. So up from where they were last year, even up from Stefanski's second half of the season average. But they're not going to run it 500 times, right? So Chubb's not going to get this crazy amount of rushing opportunity that everybody thinks just because Stefanski is a run first, second, and third kind of coach. That's just not the truth. To be clear here, I do want to say that I think Chubb is going to be near the top of the list in a lot of categories in rushing efficiency. He's going to have one of the best yards per carry in the league because that's what he does. He is an explosive fucking back. I think he's going to be top 12 in rushing attempts. Even with Stefanski running it less than he did to begin last season, he's still going to be right there. I think I have him at about 248, 250, something like that carries. But as I said with Josh Jacobs, rushing prowess on the ground is not enough in PPR fantasy football anymore, not in today's game. I could give you the same stat I did a minute ago about only 2 backs having less than 25 catches, finishing in the top 12. Well, look, Chubb is, I think his pace was, 20 when Kareem Hunt was in the game. His pace was 8. No, where was it? Hang on. 22, right? So he was on a 22 game pace with Kareem Hunt in the game. I don't think he has 25 catches. I think I gave him 20. Nick Chubb stands as maybe a slightly better chance of having 25 receptions than Josh Jacobs does this season, but not a whole lot. I think he has a slightly better chance of having double-digit rushing touchdowns as Josh Jacobs does, just because he can score from afar. But unless he's going 15 or more, again, don't draft him. My stat line for this guy, 1,264 rushing yards. Again, a big number, 7 rushing touchdowns, 2 fumbles, 24 catches and 182 receiving yards, 0 touchdowns through the air. So those numbers would have been 18th in the league last season. I've got him at 22 right now. I don't want anything to do with him at 8 or 11 where he's going in ADP.
This one's tough for me because – so if you go back up to the splits, I'll toss them on the screen too. I forgot to mention it when you were talking. Say we just take the splits that he had with Kareem Hunt. That would have placed him at RB16 in PPR last year with the really crappy touchdown numbers. Touchdown per carry inside the red zone numbers. But if you would have given him the other side, the out of split, he would have been the RB2, 100 points behind CMC, but relatively most seasons he would have been the RB1. To me, I think when people are looking at this, it's more so they're thinking that the out of split was actually sustainable for a whole season regularly. Maybe one season, yes. I think that maybe around 16 to 17 would have been reasonable. 15 without Kareem Hunt. He was just breaking off so many runs, which he definitely can do. So I think even if you gave him the 13 points per game, he has to get more red zone. He has to get more touchdowns in the red zone because he was terrible, but Kareem Hunt had less than 1 red zone opportunity per game, despite Nick Chubb being that bad. I know that Kitchens is there. Stefanski will hopefully reflect it. But it was like 56 to 8 red zone touches for Chubb to Hunt. So even if that averages out, even if it splits in half, 28 red zone touches for Nick Chubb, you would think with the improved offensive line would get him, I would think, I don't know. My guess would be, I'm going to say 8 touchdowns within there, maybe 7 touchdowns within there. And then he's going to break off some big ones. So I think that he's still a decent value, like a late RB1. I just think that people are putting the out of splits with Kareem Hunt as this is what he can do every single game without another guy on the field. Because you got to think about it too. They were kind of rolling at the beginning of the season. I don't remember what the record was, but they weren't falling apart. The team was semi put together, and I think they're going to have a little bit of growing pains to start. You said you had him projected for
1,264 rushing yards, 7 touchdowns.
429 rushing attempts. So I'm doing my projections on a 16-game season, just because that's a fantasy season projection. I have him for 456 at a 49% run rate, just because I think that this team is still going to be bad. I don't think they're going to be that great of a team. Their passing schedule is easy, which to me is going to open up more rushing attempts because this team needs all the help they can passing, and they're going to do what's working, which will be the rushing game. I think there's definitely room to be concerned. I just think that the splits without Hunt are they're just being – people are placing that as the normal, which makes the other side look bad, when in reality, if he was the RB16 last year, obviously that's not good, but he was 3 points away from the RB13 in that case, or 14. So, in reality, RB14 or RB16 with literally the worst red zone inside the 5 rushing attempts I've ever seen in my life. 15, and he had, 2 touchdowns and negative yards. How do you even get -4? That means you're going backwards on almost every single rushing attempt, and you scored twice. So you had to go backwards 3-4 yards a couple of times. So, yeah, I think –
This is what's happening. This is what's happening, okay? People see a guy like – Nick, and this is a problem. This is one of these emotional problems that the Wiz yells at me about all the time on my podcast. But people see a guy like Nick Chubb and they say, "Oh my God, he's so good with the ball. He's so fun to watch, so explosive, can score on just about any play." And they put themselves in a coaching position in the NFL, and they say, "Look, if I'm the coach, he's getting all the work. He's the workhorse back." Yeah. So I'm going to project him as the workhorse back, rank him as if he's a workhorse back, and they ignore the fact that that's not what happens 8 times out of 12 in the NFL. In the NFL, coaches don't like to use – this happened – I know Aaron Jones had a big year last year, but you remember 2 seasons ago, or was it 3 seasons ago, Aaron Jones looked so much better than Jamal Williams that people week in and week out were screaming at the fucking TV about why isn't Aaron Jones getting all the work? Because that's not what coaches want to do. But fantasy owners see a guy like Chubb and see what he can do, and they project him as if he's the only guy. They put on their coaching hat, and they're not fucking NFL coaches. They have no idea how to do it, and they rank him as if he's the only dude. It's not smart, and it's easy to forget because even when Kareem Hunt came back last year, he was limited work, right? We saw you said it yourself. He didn't get a ton of work in the red zone, didn't get a lot of carries in general in a lot of his games, but Kareem Hunt is a fucking explosive back too. And I think what's going to happen early on in this season is people are going to see Kareem Hunt doing a lot of what Nick Chubb is doing. And it's going to be buy Kareem Hunt and sell Nick Chubb real quickly. I think the trade market's going to reflect that when people see that, because they got to see it with their eyes. They didn't see it with Kareem Hunt last year. They've seen Chubb enough that they just want him to be the guy. That's what's happening. And they're wrong.
And the only guy you can actually do that with.
If you love Chubb, wait till week 3 or 4 when Kareem Hunt's had a couple of big games, at least as big as Chubb, and they're splitting work evenly. Then trade for him because you'll get him at a discount.
For sure. And I think the only guy that you can do that with is Derrick Henry, not because he doesn't have a backup running back that I think is good. It's because they could care less to have him long term. And you look at a guy like Nick Chubb, they obviously care to have him long term if they keep bringing a guy to catch some passes, to take off some work. So, yeah, I think it's definitely a cautionary pick. I wouldn't be smashing per se if I miss out on the running backs I want. But I think on the turn, I think if you pair him with another safer guy like an Austin Eckler or go Julio or something, I definitely think it's still a good stack. But, yeah, I do see the concern. I just think people might be overvaluing it a little bit in comparison to what
he's a good 2. He's a good 2. Mm-hmm. I would love him as a 2. You just can't draft him as a 2. That's the problem.
For sure. My last guy is Todd Gurley, and I will preface this as we could come back in 2 weeks when the draft guide drops, and we'll see how my projections play out. So I'm kind of like at a crossroads.
I bet you label him as a steal when the draft guide comes.
I don't know yet because okay, so Fantasy Mojo RB16, Fantasy Pros RB16. So I don't think he's going to move up. I don't think he's going to move down because it's going to be hard to move him up over the guys that are ahead of him. Maybe Fournette might be the only guy they might swap, but the other guys are pretty like set in stone. If you asked anyone, they would take him over Todd Gurley most likely. Even basic players would definitely do the same. And I think the guys behind him are like, there's definitely a reason he's right here. And that to me is my projections will show, because I haven't found a way out to do sort of besides just guessing how many games they're going to miss. I want to get like an actual like numbers-based approach to missing games, not
it's
just
so hard. I've tried for years.
So I might just randomly throw in like, I don't know, 3 games missed, but I want to figure out a way to do that somehow. So basically what it comes down to is Dirk Cutter does not produce fantasy running backs in PPR. His average fantasy finish is RB21, but the last 4 seasons has been RB 39.25 or RB 39. So it's just not been the greatest. They've also not really had any running backs to work with, the up and down of Freeman's injury, Brian Hill, Quadri Allison. But it's not like Todd Gurley's not also injured. The Rams just took a huge cap hit and then wasted their early pick to draft his replacement and still hold that cap hit because they just didn't want to be associated with his knee problems. So that being said, the knee problems are still there. Dirk Cutter and the coaching staff literally said, we don't know how his knee is after they signed him. They signed him to a deal that does not lock up anything long-term. He has to earn all his money, obviously besides like the $2 million, but that's nothing compared to salary cap. He has to earn all his money, so he's going to have to play for it. That could also be a good thing, that he's going to be playing for his money, that he'll stay healthy, he's going to work hard. But I can't quantify that in fantasy rankings. The Falcons this year have the toughest strength of schedule based on 2020 win totals. That identifies negative game scripts. That doesn't play necessarily to Todd Gurley's, you could say, game. I would say probably doesn't necessarily play to the Falcons running back game because when Matt Ryan is playing, his RB1 averages 40 targets a season, which that would have ranked him as 35th among the 35th highest running back in targets last year, which is not good. You don't want a running back. I mean, like you do, but you don't, especially if you're RB16. It kind of falls into that Josh Jacobs, Nick Chubb sort of category of not really elite target share. But the part of where I said my projections might reflect elsewhere is I have them projected for a lot of pass attempts. Currently, I have them projected for 1,042 plays in 15 games. And I guess I don't have it broken down to a ton, but basically 1,042 plays, 677 passing attempts. And he's throwing to Julio Jones, Calvin Ridley, kind of Russell Gage, kind of Hayden Hurst, and kind of Todd Gurley. So something has to come up out of those 3 utility extra players, you could say. So I definitely could see a realm where he secures a nice market share. But that being said, he's still injured. It's still concerning. And the Falcons also had the lowest run rate last year. Dirk Cutter especially just throws the ball. The 4th highest pass rate when winning. And you'd be like, well, they're not going to be winning very many games. You just said they had the toughest strength of schedule. Well, they had the 3rd highest pass rate when they're trailing as well. So they're just going to try and chuck the ball. Their defense still sucks. They're going to be trailing a lot. So I think I'm just more so fading the uncertainty of the injury. Will the Falcons even use him the way the Rams did 2 years ago? Because it's very unlikely. And RB16, I think he's in round 3 ADP. I would much rather just go tight end or receiver in this round and prioritize running backs the first 2 rounds.
So I disagree. I like Todd Gurley a lot. Obviously, the injury thing. When you're ranking guys, it's hard to. Like you said, it's hard to predict injuries. Who knows what's going to happen? I did take a lot away from him. He's under 900 yards rushing, just barely over 200 carries, because I think they're going to share the load there and try to ease his knee issues as much as they can. But I gave him 53 catches because, like you said, they passed the ball quite a lot. The big thing for me, though, was touchdowns. I mean, if you look at even like Devonta Freeman last year, Devonta Freeman was a stud. They used him a ton in the red zone last season. I think he's going to score a bunch of touchdowns. I think 9 on the ground is what I gave him, which sounds a little high, and that might come down before all is said and done. But I also gave him a few in the air. So to me, it's the touchdowns. I probably do it just because we know this team scores, right? I mean, I want a guy on a team that I know is going to score a lot of points. That said, he's my running back 20 in a PPR. So, like, I'm not taking him. Where did you say he was going? 16, 17?
16,
yeah. I'm not taking him there, but he is one of my targets later on if he can fall a little bit, especially in these dynasty startups where people devalue age by so much.
For sure. So that being said, whereof as of, I guess, whatever today, we're recording this on Monday, but whereof this week are you finding yourself in mock drafts with running backs? Have you been targeting 1-2 just to get it over with, and then be going, I don't know, around 6, 7, 8 because there's some value down there. But what has your strategy been so far this year?
My strategy lifetime has been in the first 3 rounds, I want 2 backs and a receiver. I don't care where they go. It depends on who falls, where I'm at, right? If I'm in the top half, obviously I'm taking a back early. If I'm in the back half, I like to look wide receiver early because I want just the best player I can get at the position. But I always want to have 2 backs early in those first 2 rounds. Then I won't touch it again until I get down to round 6 or 7. So like I'm looking at guys in 6 and 7 that I can snag like a Singletary or something that might end up being a stud starter anyway. But yeah, I like 2 guys early. Give me 2 guys in the top 3 rounds.
Yeah, I think 95% of the time I go running back in round 1. I might reach on – I mean, you have your top 4 locked in. They're not making a pass. Pick 5 more often than not. Michael Thomas might be thrown in there. And then after that, it's really Cook, Mixon, Henry, Eckler, Drake, Sanders, Chubb, Jacobs. Like I'm more often than not just going to take them because I don't want to get sniped and have to take Leonard Fournette or Todd Gurley is kind of the way I've been flowing with it this year. And there's so much value. I mean, you probably hear this on every other podcast you listen to or video you watch, so much receiver value. But that being said, I think if the ADPs start getting out of hand, I think 0 running back could definitely be an approach. We'll see come August. I mean, I don't know, because if like Michael Thomas starts slipping to the end and you start with the Michael Thomas Julio stack, Michael Thomas Tyreek stack, and then you somehow land Kittle in round 3, like, I mean, we'll see kind of how it flows. But the way the ADPs are shaken up, it's not the greatest in terms of you. Basically, what I'm saying is you want a top 4 pick, or you kind of just want to be towards the end of the draft to make sure you get Julio or Adams or Drake or someone. But it's definitely getting out of hand, I would say.
I have, I always try to do this. Like I'll snag 2 of these top end receivers in my mock drafts. I try it all the time, but inevitably every single time, by the time I'm finished with my draft, I'm disappointed with my team. So it's so hard for me not to snag 2 backs in those top 3. I want to take back what I said a minute ago. I had my spreadsheet sorted wrong. Todd Gurley is not my number 20 PPR running back. He's my number 10 PPR running back right now. I'm probably going to take a touchdown or 2 away before this is all said and done. Drop him down. He feels more like he's a 14 kind of guy, but right now he's my 10. So I am in direct opposition to your statements earlier. I take them personally, and I'm drafting Todd Gurley wherever I can.
I don't know. Well, like I said, we'll see come draft guide launch where my projections have him. But projections aren't always rankings, 2 completely different things. So we'll see kind of how it flows. Draft guide, July 13th. Link down below. We probably should have prefaced at the beginning to go order. It's just a Google form. We're not rich enough to have the pretty cool credit card, debit card thing on the website.
So, no, that's not how you say that. Here's how you say that.
Oh, sorry.
We could fucking integrate really fancy tools that make it so that, we don't have to manage it all. It looks all super professional, but we're trying to save you money because if we pay for it, you pay for it. So we're not paying for it to make our draft guide the cheapest fucking draft guide out there, the best goddamn value you can find for your money. It doesn't get that's how you say that shit. It doesn't get better.
It's pretty cheap. I will say that for sure. So down below.
Wait.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Before you go, can I plug something?
Yeah, go for it.
I just want to plug my podcast here. I don't ever say the name of my podcast on your show. A lot of respect for you. Your Football Fantasy is my podcast. On Sunday, July 12th, we will be releasing our 100th episode. I know I said it a minute ago, but it's going to be fucking amazing. I want you all to go check it out. Your Football Fantasy. You can find it anywhere podcasts are at. It's going to be good. Lucas, I think you're going to have a role in this 100th episode. I haven't told you to talk to you about it yet, but I think it's going to happen. We'll catch up after the show. I want people to go listen to my 100th episode, okay? Somebody might die. We did kick around the idea of maybe bringing a wife or 2 and like doing a little weird sex party thing on air, but we'll see. I don't know if she's into that.
All right, you heard it here, guys. Your Football Fantasy. Yeah.
Live sex show.
Live sex show. Do it up.
Shot for the people. You got one?
Sure.
You bitch. Oh, I love you all. Tell me how wrong I am about Nick Chubb in the comments below.
See
Subscribe.
you guys.
like,
Next
hit the
week.
bell. Let's go.